Scialach nan Gael, Pasta Gael. Tales of the Gaels, Part 2. As the sonnet of spring and the lapping of her waters kiss once again upon northern shores left all thick and mangled in the seaweed of winter's repose, so too has returned the time once more, dear listener, for this here humble reciter of thoughts and daydreams to untangle the bindweed of his pondering in order to perhaps enlighten the mind unto the enduring mystery of the sacredness of old tales. Old tales that have faced the turning of many snowfalls and springtides. Old tales that have clung to the hearts of many wayfarers and storytellers, bellowing and gushing down through the eternal rushing waters of time. Old tales where pilgrims unto this day yet continue in their endless search for to seek out the treasure and magic of epic parables. For the love of great story, it may well be said, is an enduring tenderness which has lingered in the hearts of men and women the great world over, when the knowledge of the mountain passes and their miraculous thoroughfares lay undiscovered in the mists of their youthfulness. Low does the heart sing unto those far-off dreamy days of the children of the heather and the skilfulness of their prose, a prose crafted and perfected like the mighty winding valleys that merge in their splendour all over the wilderness of rough bounds and the bewilderment of the sacred islands to the west. As to already alluded, dear listener, the tender tones of springs are once again tuning nature's lute for to drive out the dismay of winter's heedlessness. The little birds of the forest are once again busy in their giddiness and merrymaking, composing their unfathomable rhapsody for to silence the strings of the most deft harpist. For has returned the promise of summer and her garb of greenery and lushness. The lowing of the cattle fold and the frolicking of the little lambs display their vigour in the meadows of long grass and countless flowers. The humble hand that pushes his quill for to blot the leaf is himself resurgent unto the bursting of springtime and the stretching of days. For this time of year, as she was known unto those lost children of the Highlands of Scotland, the Gael was Seanchaidh, spring. The word erach, in the ingenious language of the Gaels of Scotland, is indeed a most descriptive term, for such is the way of things in the mighty canon of words found in the indigenous way of speech. The root word in Gaelic is the equivalent to the word for east in the English tongue. This sound or word is surely born of old and is reflective of the sun's journey from eastern skies. Is it not indeed of further interest to the student of etymology that the word in Gaelic for rise is erich? If fortunate you are, O ardent seeker of the memory of ancient ponderings, you can yet hear to this day the term eri na graine, rising of the sun, among the remaining speakers of the archaic vocabulary now flung across the globe in their minority from Alpa to Alpa Nuach, Scotland to Nova Scotia, and yet further afield. Like any other topic for conversation when alluding to the waning moon of old tales, spring has her story, and her many countless forms of song and incantations throughout the philosophy of the civilization of the Gael. It is with this in mind that this here dreamer of antiquities will venture forth on his musings and ramblings with the hope that something of the essence from days gone past may be imparted. Spring was divided into two different parts unto Scotland's Gaels of old, Erich Gaelry and Erich Selry, the winter side of spring and the summer side of spring. For who that dwells in the land of mountains and floods has not felt of the cold blast of the north wind at the start of spring before she mutates into the warm eddies of summer's bliss? Perhaps the most far-famed of legends of the Gael relating to this time of year is Beltane, or as she was most often referred to in that ancient mode of speech as La Booya Beltane, the yellow day of Beltane, the 1st of May. Beltane is a word worthy of deeper discussion, as it conjures up much contemplation when looked upon with an eye toward the root meaning of the word. It is said by many apt scholars from yesteryear to the present day that the arrival of summer on the day of Beltane has its roots in Phoenician origin, which may well account something of the mystical origins of the Gael, although there are many. Baal and Ashtoreth were known as the supreme male and female divinities among the Phoenician and Canaanish nations, which, as far as this here reciter is aware, were indicative of the powers of nature corresponding to the sun and moon. When the term Baal, supreme male, lord, is coupled with the Gaelic word for fire, chene, the compound word Beltane is formed, thus giving the imagery or meaning of the Lord of Heaven, the sun. It may well be supposed, although it cannot be said with any certainty, that the term balefire in the English language has a lingering connection to the archaic Gaelic word. As to other suggestions, which have been relayed from the lips of the older inhabitants of the Highlands, it has been put forth that the word Baal, meaning mouth, opening, is the root of the word Baal in Beltane. With this alternative compound being formed, the meaning here could thus be rendered as Baal Chene, the mouth or opening of fire, which would be indicative of the strength of the sun coming to its prowess at the approaching of summertime. It may be somewhat of interest at this time to the student of Gaelic obscurities that the word for the sun in Gaelic is Grian, which was reported by an aged collector of whom witnessed the passing of the way of life of the children of lofty pine trees as coming from the Gaelic words Cree Henne, the shaking or vibration of fire. This again is indicative that the sun was once alluded to as a kind of fire, which almost certainly gives credence to the misty meaning of Beltane and its connection to fire. As a final note that must be added to and addressed when discussing the time of Beltane and its connection to the Highlands and Islands is the traditional word for May in the Gaelic language, Caithin. Caithin, unto my own learning and understanding, is yet another compound word, of which there are so many flowing through the vocabulary of the magical tongue of the Gael, is composed of the words Ciat and Chene. Ciat, Chene, or Caithin, signifies the descriptive term meaning first fire, surely indicative of the beginning of the summer season, which in itself opens a door onto another topic for discussion. With this at the forefront of this here reciter's mind at present, we shall leave behind the roots of words and their origins and embark toward an altogether different slipstream of pondering and story. For are not the calling of summer pastures and the stretching of days now tugging on the heartstrings of quiet solitude? Then take it upon ourselves we must to head to the hills of wild heath and heather, as was customary to the ancient Gael. For in that time of splendour is where that ancient race spent their long days and nights of summer times, in the Aryan, Sheelings, or summer pastures. As we embark upon our climb past darkened little lakes, or na lochin, as they were known in the old tongue, it is perhaps fitting at this point to impart something of the traditions, if it is at all possible with the restriction of time, of La Buye Beltane, Beltane, or the 1st of May. Beltane fires were most commonly lit on the mountain tops, a tradition said to be passed down from the hazy days of Nadruyan, the Druids. It may be of interest once again to the listener that the word drui, meaning magical or impressive in Gaelic, is itself pertaining to the memory of Nadruyan, the Druids, as the word drui itself is evident in the word druid. I have also heard in many wanderings from oral tradition, although I will not commit myself in any shape or form that it is the truth, that the root of the word for tree in the English language comes from the word drui, as the Druids were known as the men of woods, or forests, or of the trees. That the Beltane fires were central to the way of life of the Gaels cannot be denied, for at this time of year all the village fires across the Highlands and Islands were extinguished and then relit from the Chenekin, need fire, which was divided into 2 fires, one for the cattle and one for the people who rushed through the flames for purification, safeguarding against Eltry, Gistosky, mischance and misfortune. Through the many districts of Gaeldom, it was once customary for the young to meet on the moors or mountains in order to partake in a most curious tradition, which would involve the cutting of a trench with a circumference big enough to fit the gathering of the youth itself in. There then would be lit a fire from within the circle, on which a cake made of eggs, milk and oatmeal was heated before it was divided into as many pieces as was at all possible. One of these pieces was then smothered in charcoal before being put into a bonnet along with the rest of the pieces. The youth gathered within the circle and would then be blindfolded, and in turn they would each choose a piece of cake out of the bonnet. The one who chose the piece blackened in charcoal was the one who was to be sacrificed to Baal, whose favour they sought for the year that lay ahead. The youth who chose the piece of cake blackened in charcoal then would leap over the fire 3 times. It perhaps should be noticed by the listener that the supreme deity of the Phoenician and Canaanish nations featured in this tradition, which may well indeed give somewhat confirmation as to the origin of the word Beltane, discussed forehand. The ticking of the ceaseless clock is once again resounding in the ear of this here reciter, and on that note, I would like to wish you a warm goodbye for now, or as it is said in the exquisite tongue of the Gael, Slán lí bhuaile ar an air.